please, he won't move." The little girl's voice cracked as she tugged on the biker's leather jacket. Against every instinct, he followed her down that dirt road. 30 seconds later, he was calling 911 with tears streaming down his face. If you're ready for the full story, go ahead and subscribe. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I've got another unbelievable story coming tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. All right, let's get into it. The heat rose in shimmering waves off Highway 47, distorting the horizon into a liquid mirage that promised relief, but delivered only more scorching asphalt. Patrick Harris felt the sun beating down on his leather vest. The kind of oppressive summer heat that made even breathing feel like work. But he didn't mind. The discomfort kept him sharp, kept him present, kept him from thinking too much about things that didn't matter anymore. Behind him, the Iron Riders MC rolled in formation. 20 bikes strong, their engines creating a symphony of controlled power that announced their presence miles before they arrived anywhere. This was Patrick's world now. Had been for the better part of 2 decades. A world of chrome and leather, of brotherhood forged in fire, of rules that made sense because they were simple. Loyalty above all, trust only your brothers, and never, ever let the outside world in. "Boss, we're running on fumes." Tank's voice crackled through the helmet comm. "There's a station about 2 miles up." Patrick nodded, though Tank couldn't see it, and signaled the turn. The Iron Riders peeled off the highway in perfect synchronization, a well-oiled machine of men who'd learned to move as one unit. It was beautiful in its own way, this choreography of controlled chaos. The gas station that appeared on their right looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. The sign advertising regular unleaded at $1.89 hadn't been updated since the 90s. Rust ate through the metal awning. Weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete. But the pumps worked. That's all that mattered. Patrick kicked down his stand and swung off his bike, his muscles protesting slightly. He was 38 now, not the angry 20-year-old who'd first thrown his leg over a motorcycle, and decided that the open road was the only family he'd ever need. Age had a way of creeping up on you, reminding you that even iron eventually rusts. "This place is a dump," Reaper commented, pulling off his helmet to reveal a shaved head covered in intricate tattoos. Probably hasn't seen a customer in months. "Long as the gas flows, I don't care if it's held together with duct tape and prayers," Patrick replied, reaching for the pump. That's when he heard it. At first, it was just another sound in the ambient noise of idling engines and men's voices. But something about it cut through everything else. A desperate, hitching sob that spoke of terror so pure it bypassed all rational thought and went straight to some primal part of the brain that recognized a child in distress. Patrick's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the station. The other riders had heard it too. Conversations died. Hands moved instinctively toward weapons that weren't there, old habits from harder times. Then she appeared. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, burst from behind the dumpster at the side of the building. Her skin was dark, beautiful even under the layer of dust and grime that covered her. Her hair was pulled back in uneven braids that looked like they'd been done days ago and had slowly come undone. But it was her feet that Patrick noticed first. Bare, bleeding, covered in cuts and scrapes that spoke of running long and hard over unforgiving ground. Her shirt, once white, now gray with dirt, was torn at the shoulder, hanging loose and revealing a thin frame that suggested too many missed meals. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes wild with panic, her chest heaving with the kind of desperate breaths that come right before complete breakdown. And she was running straight toward him. Patrick's first instinct was to step back. He didn't do kids, didn't do family situations. The Iron Riders had a code, and that code was clear. Handle your own problems, stay out of civilian business, and never get emotionally involved with people outside the club. It was a good code. It had kept him alive and sane for 20 years. But his feet wouldn't move. The girl reached him in seconds, and before he could react, small hands grabbed onto his leather vest with surprising strength. She looked up at him, and Patrick felt something twist in his chest at the expression on her face. Pure, undiluted terror, mixed with desperate hope. Like he was simultaneously the scariest and most important person she'd ever seen. "Please, mister, please," she sobbed, her whole body shaking so hard Patrick could feel the tremors through his vest. "My dad won't wake up. I've tried everything. I shook him. I yelled at him. I threw water on his face, but he won't open his eyes. Please, you have to help me." Patrick's mind raced through possibilities. Scam, setup, ambush. In their world, crying kids and desperate pleas were classic tactics for luring marks into vulnerable positions. He'd seen it before, heard stories about clubs that had fallen for similar cons, and paid the price. But he looked down at this child. Really looked. And saw details that couldn't be faked. The blood on her feet was real, still fresh, mixing with the dust to create dark smears. Her knees were scraped raw, the kind of injuries you get from falling multiple times but getting back up, because stopping isn't an option. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Her eyes had the glassy quality of someone running on pure adrenaline, past the point of exhaustion into that dangerous territory where the body keeps moving even though it should have collapsed hours ago. This wasn't a con. This was real. "Kid, slow down," Patrick said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. He wasn't used to talking to children, wasn't used to the way they looked at you like you might actually be able to fix things. "Where's your mom? Other family? Someone we can call?" "No, Mom," the girl wailed, her voice rising to a pitch that made several of the bikers wince. "No family. Just Dad and me. And he won't wake up. I think he might be dying." The last word came out as a broken sob. And Patrick felt that twist in his chest again, sharper this time. He'd spent 20 years building walls around whatever part of him used to feel things like compassion and empathy. Those walls had served him well. They'd kept him focused, kept him strong, kept him from getting hurt. But this little girl's desperate plea was finding cracks he didn't know existed. Tank moved closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over both Patrick and the child. He leaned in, his voice low enough that only Patrick could hear. "Boss, this smells wrong. Crying kid, isolated location, nobody around. It's textbook setup. We go with her, we could be riding into an ambush." Patrick had thought the same thing. Every instinct honed by years of living on the edge screamed at him to walk away. Get back on the bike. Ride away from this situation before it became his problem. But he looked down at the girl again, and this time he noticed more details. The way her hands trembled as they gripped his vest. The way her breath came in short, panicked gasps that suggested she was on the verge of hyperventilating. The way her eyes darted between him and the road behind her, like she was terrified he'd say no, and equally terrified of what was waiting back wherever she'd come from. And her feet, God, her feet. The soles were torn up, bleeding from multiple cuts. She'd run far, run hard, run until her body gave out, and then kept running anyway. Nobody faked that kind of desperation. Nobody could. "What's your name, kid?" Patrick asked, his voice gentler this time. The girl blinked up at him, seeming surprised by the question. "Kelly," she stammered, wiping at her tears with hands that left dirt streaks across her face. "Howard Kelly. But everyone just calls me Kelly. Please, mister, will you help my dad? I don't know what to do. I don't know who else to ask. I saw your motorcycles and I thought maybe." Her voice broke completely, dissolving into sobs that shook her entire frame. Patrick felt something crack inside him, something he'd thought was dead and buried long ago. He looked at Tank, then at the rest of his crew, seeing his own conflict reflected in their faces. They were hard men, all of them. Had to be, to survive in their world. But they weren't monsters. "How far?" Patrick asked. Kelly's head snapped up, hope flooding her face so suddenly it was almost painful to witness. "Just down the road. Maybe 10 minutes. I can show you. Please, I'll show you exactly where." Patrick straightened up, his decision made even though every rational part of his brain was screaming at him that this was a mistake. He looked at his crew, his brothers, the men who'd followed him through hell and back more times than he could count. "Tank, Reaper, Chains, you're with me," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him club president. "Rest of you, stay here. Keep your phones on. If we're not back in 30 minutes, or if you don't hear from us, you know what to do." The unspoken message was clear. If this was a setup, if they were riding into an ambush, the rest of the crew would come in hot and heavy. It was insurance, the kind of backup plan that had kept them alive through situations that should have killed them. Tank nodded, his expression still skeptical but trusting Patrick's judgment. Reaper and Chains moved to their bikes without question. That was the thing about the Iron Riders. Once a decision was made, everyone fell in line. No second-guessing, no hesitation. Patrick looked down at Kelly, who was staring up at him with an expression of such profound relief and gratitude that it made his chest ache. "All right, kid. I'll follow you. But you need to hold on tight and don't let go, understand?" Kelly nodded frantically, fresh tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears. Not panic anymore. Hope. Patrick lifted her onto the back of his bike, feeling how light she was, how her thin arms barely made it around his waist. When was the last time this kid had eaten a proper meal? When was the last time anyone had taken care of her? "What's your name, mister?" Kelly asked, her voice small and muffled against his back. "Patrick," he said, firing up the engine. "Patrick Harris. But you can call me Harris. Everyone does." "Thank you, Mr. Harris," Kelly whispered. "Thank you for not leaving me." Patrick didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Because something about those words, "thank you for not leaving me," hit him in a place he'd thought was armored beyond reach. He kicked his bike into gear, and with Tank, Reaper, and Chains flanking him, followed Kelly's directions down Highway 47. The girl's arms tightened around his waist as they picked up speed, and Patrick found himself driving more carefully than usual, hyper-aware of his precious cargo. "Turn here," Kelly shouted over the engine noise, pointing to a dirt road that branched off the highway. Patrick signaled and turned, the other 3 bikes following. The road was rough, unpaved, the kind of forgotten path that led to forgotten places. They passed abandoned farmhouses, rusted-out cars, and fields overgrown with weeds. This was the America nobody talked about. The places left behind when the economy moved on, where people fell through the cracks and disappeared. There. Kelly pointed ahead to a trailer that looked like it might collapse in the next strong wind. Patrick's stomach sank. He'd seen poverty before. Hell, he'd lived it. But there was something particularly heartbreaking about this scene. The trailer was more rust than metal, sitting on cinder blocks with one corner sagging dangerously. The windows were cracked, covered with cardboard and duct tape. The yard was dirt and weeds, littered with broken furniture and trash that suggested the garbage service had stopped coming long ago. This wasn't just poverty. This was desperation. This was what happened when the system failed and nobody noticed. Kelly was off the bike before it fully stopped, her bare feet hitting the dirt as she ran toward the trailer. "Daddy? Daddy, I brought help. Please wake up." Patrick dismounted more slowly, exchanging glances with Tank. The big man's expression had shifted from skepticism to something else. Concern, maybe even pity. They'd all seen hard times, but this was different. Patrick followed Kelly to the trailer door, which hung crooked on its hinges. She pushed it open and disappeared inside, still calling for her father. The interior was dim, lit only by sunlight filtering through the cardboard-covered windows. It took Patrick's eyes a moment to adjust. But when they did, the scene that greeted him hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. The trailer was one room, essentially. A combination living space, kitchen, and bedroom. But calling it any of those things was generous. There was no furniture except for a threadbare couch and a card table with 2 folding chairs. The kitchen consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge, both unplugged. The floor was bare plywood, warped and stained. And on the couch lay a man who looked like death had already started claiming him. He couldn't have been older than 35, but he looked ancient. His skin had a grayish pallor, slick with sweat despite the stifling heat. His breathing was shallow and labored, each breath seeming to require enormous effort. His clothes hung on a frame that had clearly lost significant weight recently. Kelly was kneeling beside the couch, shaking her father's shoulder. "Daddy, please, I brought help. You have to wake up." Patrick moved closer, his trained eye taking in details. On the card table sat a collection of pill bottles, most of them empty. He picked one up, insulin, another metformin, diabetes medications. And beside them, a blood glucose monitor with a cracked screen and what looked like the last test strip. "Tank, call 911, Patrick said, his voice tight. "Now." He knelt beside Kelly, gently moving her aside so he could check the man's pulse. It was there, but weak and thready. His skin was cold and clammy. Classic signs of severe hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar. "Kelly," Patrick said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. "Your dad has diabetes, right?" Kelly nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. "He has to take shots every day. But we ran out of the test strips last week, so he's been guessing how much insulin to take. This morning he said he felt dizzy and needed to lie down, and then he wouldn't wake up." Patrick's jaw clenched. The man had been flying blind, trying to manage a serious medical condition without the tools to do it properly. And he'd miscalculated, given himself too much insulin, and crashed. "Do you have any juice? Soda? Candy? Anything with sugar in it? Patrick asked urgently. Kelly's face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. We don't have anything. We were supposed to go to the food bank today, but Daddy was too tired to drive. We haven't had food in 2 days. The words hung in the air like an accusation. No food for 2 days. A diabetic man with no food, trying to manage his insulin. It was a recipe for disaster. Patrick stood up, looking around the trailer with new eyes. The kitchen cabinet stood open, completely empty except for a half box of stale crackers. The mini fridge, when he opened it, contained nothing but condiment packets and a jug of water. On the counter sat a disconnection notice from the power company dated 3 weeks ago. Beside it, a mountain of medical bills, each one stamped in angry red letters. Past due, final notice, account sent to collections. This family wasn't just struggling, they were drowning. Ambulance is 10 minutes out, Tank reported from the doorway. I told them possible diabetic emergency. Not fast enough, Patrick muttered. He turned to Reaper. You got that emergency glucose gel in your first aid kit? Reaper nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a small tube. Patrick took it, kneeling beside the unconscious man again. Kelly, I need you to help me, okay? Patrick said gently. We're going to give your dad some medicine that will help wake him up. But I need you to hold his hand and talk to him. Can you do that? Kelly nodded, her small hand wrapping around her father's limp one. And then she started singing. It was a lullaby, soft and sweet, sung in a voice that trembled but never broke. Patrick recognized the melody. His own mother used to sing it to him, back before everything went wrong. The memory hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. He carefully squeezed glucose gel into the unconscious man's mouth, massaging his throat to help him swallow. It was a slow process, and every second felt like an eternity. Kelly never stopped singing, never let go of her father's hand. Minutes crawled by. Patrick found himself holding his breath, watching for any sign of response. Come on, he thought. Come on, damn it. Don't leave this kid alone. And then, finally, the man's eyelids fluttered. Kelly. The word came out as barely a whisper, confused and disoriented. Daddy! Kelly threw her arms around her father's neck, sobbing with relief. You're awake. You're awake. I thought you were going to leave me like Mommy did. The man's eyes opened fully, struggling to focus. His gaze moved from Kelly to Patrick, confusion giving way to alarm. Who? What? Easy, Patrick said, holding up his hands in a non-threatening gesture. Your daughter found us at a gas station. You were unconscious. Ambulance is on the way. The man tried to sit up, but Patrick gently pushed him back down. Don't move. Your blood sugar crashed hard. You need medical attention. I can't, the man started, panic creeping into his voice. I can't afford an ambulance. I can't afford the hospital. I dash. We'll figure it out, Patrick said, surprised by his own words. Right now, you need to focus on staying conscious until the paramedics get here. The man's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Kelly. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I tried to be careful with the insulin, but without the test strips. It's okay, Daddy, Kelly said, still clinging to him. Mr. Harris helped. He made you wake up. The man looked at Patrick again. Really looked this time, taking in the leather vest, the patches, the hard face that had intimidated countless people over the years. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not just driving away." Patrick didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he'd almost done exactly that. That every instinct had screamed at him to walk away. That he still wasn't sure why he'd made the choice he did. The sound of sirens in the distance saved him from having to respond. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of efficient movement and medical jargon that washed over Patrick like a foreign language. He stepped back, giving them room to work, watching as they checked vitals, started an IV, and asked questions in calm, professional voices that seemed designed to cut through panic. Kelly refused to let go of her father's hand, even as the paramedics worked around her. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, knelt down to Kelly's level. "Sweetheart, we need to take your daddy to the hospital so the doctors can help him feel better. You can ride with us in the ambulance, okay?" Kelly's eyes went wide with fear. "Is he going to die?" "No, honey. We got to him in time, but he needs fluids and monitoring for the next few hours." The paramedic glanced at Kelly's feet, her expression shifting to concern. "And we need to clean up those feet of yours. How far did you run?" "I don't know," Kelly said in a small voice. "I just kept running until I found someone." The paramedic looked up at Patrick, a question in her eyes. He shrugged, not sure what she was asking or what answer she wanted. As they loaded Kelly's father, whose name Vincent still didn't know, onto the stretcher, the man reached out and grabbed Patrick's arm with surprising strength. "Please," he whispered, his voice urgent despite his weakness. "Don't let them take Kelly. If they find out, if social services finds out we've been living like this, they'll take her away from me. She's all I have left. Please." Patrick felt that crack in his armor widen. "Nobody's taking anybody anywhere," he said, though he had no authority to make such a promise. "Focus on getting better." The man's grip tightened. "My name is Vincent. Vincent Crawford. And I need you to know. I'm not a bad father. I'm not. Everything fell apart and I couldn't." His voice broke. "I know," Patrick said, gently prying Vincent's fingers from his arm. "We'll talk when you're stable. Right now, let them help you." As the paramedics wheeled Vincent toward the ambulance, Kelly started to follow, but Patrick noticed her limping badly. The adrenaline that had carried her through her desperate run was wearing off, and the pain was catching up. "Hold up," Patrick called to the paramedics. He scooped Kelly up before she could protest, carrying her toward the ambulance. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and fragile bones. "Her feet are torn up. She needs treatment too." The female paramedic nodded. "We'll take care of her at the hospital." "Are you family?" "No, Patrick started, then stopped. What was he? A stranger who'd gotten involved in something that wasn't his business? A biker who'd broken his own rules? "I'm the one who found them. I'll follow you to the hospital." "That's not necessary," the paramedic said, but her tone was gentle. "We've got it from here." Patrick set Kelly down in the ambulance, and she immediately grabbed his hand. "You're coming, right? You're not leaving?" He looked into those wide, terrified eyes and felt his carefully constructed world shift on its axis. "I'll be right behind you, kid. I promise. Kelly nodded, seeming to accept this, and released his hand. As the ambulance doors closed, Patrick stood in the dirt yard of the dilapidated trailer, watching the vehicle pull away with its lights flashing but no siren. A small mercy, suggesting Vincent's condition had stabilized enough that it wasn't a life-or-death race anymore. Tank appeared at his shoulder. "Boss, what are we doing here?" It was a fair question. Patrick turned to look at the trailer, really seeing it now in the harsh afternoon light. The rust, the decay, the absolute poverty of it all. This was where a 7-year-old girl lived. This was where she'd woken up this morning, found her father unconscious, and then made the terrifying decision to run for help. "I don't know," Patrick admitted. "But we can't just walk away." "Why not?" Tank asked. And there was no judgment in his voice, just genuine curiosity. "We did our good deed. Called 911, probably saved the guy's life. We can go now with a clear conscience." Patrick knew Tank was right. They'd done more than most people would have, more than they were obligated to do. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to get back on their bikes and ride away from this situation before it became complicated. But he thought about Kelly's bleeding feet, about Vincent's desperate plea not to let social services take his daughter, about the empty cabinets and the mountain of medical bills and the disconnection notices. "Go back to the gas station," Patrick said. "Tell the others to head home. I'm going to the hospital." Tank studied him for a long moment. "You sure about this, brother?" "No," Patrick said honestly. "But I'm doing it anyway." Tank nodded slowly. "Want company?" Patrick considered it, then shook his head. "This isn't club business. No reason to drag everyone into it." "All right. But call if you need anything. And I mean anything." Tank clapped him on the shoulder, then headed back to his bike. Patrick watched his crew mount up and ride away, the familiar rumble of their engines fading into the distance. Then he was alone in the yard of a falling-apart trailer, wondering what the hell he was doing and why he couldn't seem to make himself leave. He walked back to the trailer, pushing open the crooked door. In the harsh light of day, with no emergency to focus on, the poverty was even more stark. He moved through the small space, taking inventory. The bathroom was barely functional. A toilet, a sink with rust stains, and a shower with no curtain. A single towel hung on a hook, threadbare and gray. A bar of soap worn down to a sliver. A toothbrush with splayed bristles. No toilet paper, just a stack of napkins from fast food restaurants. The sleeping area consisted of the couch where Vincent had been lying and a pile of blankets in the corner that must have been Kelly's bed. No pillows, no sheets. Just blankets that looked like they'd been pulled from a donation bin. On the card table, Patrick found a notebook. He knew he shouldn't look. It was an invasion of privacy. But something compelled him to open it. The first page was a budget, written in neat handwriting that had grown increasingly shaky as the pages progressed. Income, $847. Disability, odd jobs. Rent, $400. Insulin, $300. Test strips, $75. Food, $72. Total, $847. The math was simple and devastating. After rent and medical supplies, Vincent had $72 a month for food. For 2 people. That was barely $2 a day. Patrick flipped through more pages, finding similar budgets with slight variations. Some months, Vincent had managed to pick up more odd jobs, giving them a little breathing room. Other months, the insulin had cost more, and the food budget had shrunk to nothing. The most recent entry was dated 3 days ago. Insulin, $300. Rent, $400. Test strips, none available. Food bank closed. Holiday. Kelly needs shoes. I don't know what to do anymore. The last line was underlined 3 times. The pen pressing so hard it had torn through the paper. Patrick closed the notebook, feeling something hot and angry building in his chest. This was America. This was the richest country in the world. And a man was choosing between insulin and food, between test strips and shoes for his daughter. A little girl was running barefoot on bleeding feet because her father couldn't afford the $20 a pair of shoes would cost. It was wrong. It was fundamentally, deeply wrong. Patrick pulled out his phone and called Tank. "Yeah, boss." "I need you to do something for me," Patrick said. "Call Mercy General Hospital. Find out what room Vincent Crawford is in. Then I need you to make some other calls." "What kind of calls?" Patrick looked around the trailer one more time, his jaw set. "The kind that are going to fix this situation." Mercy General Hospital was a 40-minute ride from the trailer. Patrick made it in 30, pushing his bike harder than he probably should have, driven by an urgency he didn't fully understand. The emergency room was the usual chaos. People in various states of distress, harried nurses moving between patients, the smell of antiseptic and fear. Patrick approached the desk, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in his leather vest and road-worn jeans. The nurse at the desk looked up, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to wariness. Patrick was used to that look, had been getting it his whole life. "I'm looking for Vincent Crawford," he said. "Came in about an hour ago. Diabetic emergency." "Are you family?" the nurse asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No, but—" "Then I can't give you any information. HIPAA regulations." Patrick bit back his frustration. "There's a little girl with him. Kelly, I just want to make sure she's okay." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "The little girl with the injured feet?" "Yeah, that's her." The nurse hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "She's being treated in pediatrics. 3rd floor. But you still can't see the father without his permission. Can you at least tell me if he's stable?" Another hesitation. "He's stable. That's all I can say." Patrick nodded his thanks and headed for the elevators. The 3rd floor was quieter, painted in cheerful colors that seemed designed to make sick children feel less scared. He followed the signs to pediatrics and found Kelly in a room at the end of the hall. She was sitting on an examination table, her feet wrapped in white bandages, wearing a hospital gown that was far too big for her. A nurse was offering her a juice box and a package of crackers, which Kelly accepted with trembling hands. "Mr. Harris." Kelly's face lit up when she saw him, and she nearly dropped the juice box in her excitement. "You came. You really came." "Told you I would," Patrick said, stepping into the room. He nodded to the nurse. "How is she?" "Dehydrated, malnourished, and her feet required quite a bit of cleaning and bandaging," the nurse said, her tone professional, but her eyes sad. "But she'll heal. Kids are resilient." Patrick watched Kelly gulp down the juice box like she'd been wandering in a desert. "When's the last time you ate, kid?" Kelly's eyes dropped to her lap. "Yesterday morning. Daddy gave me the last of the crackers." The nurse's expression tightened. "I've notified social services." They'll want to do an assessment. Patrick felt his stomach drop. That was exactly what Vincent had been afraid of. Is that necessary? Her dad's getting treatment. He'll be able to take care of her once he's stable. A 7-year-old girl was living without food or electricity, and her father nearly died from a preventable medical emergency. The nurse said, her voice gentle but firm. Yes, it's necessary. We have to make sure she's safe. Kelly's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. They're going to take me away from Daddy? No, sweetheart, the nurse said quickly. They just want to talk to you and your father. Make sure you have what you need. But Kelly wasn't listening. She was looking at Patrick with an expression of absolute betrayal. You said nobody was taking me anywhere. You promised. I didn't promise, Patrick said, but the words felt hollow. I said we'd figure it out. Liar! Kelly's voice rose to a shout. You're just like everyone else. You don't care. Nobody cares. She tried to jump off the examination table, but the nurse caught her. Kelly fought, tears streaming down her face, screaming for her father. It took both the nurse and Patrick to keep her from hurting herself. And even then, she fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal. Kelly, stop, Patrick said, his voice sharp with command. Stop and listen to me. Something in his tone cut through her panic. She stopped fighting, though her whole body still trembled with the effort of holding back. Patrick knelt down so he was at her eye level. I'm not going to let them take you away from your dad. You hear me? I'm going to fix this. How? Kelly demanded, her voice breaking. How are you going to fix it? You can't fix it. Nobody can fix it. We don't have any money. Daddy can't work because he gets sick. And now they're going to take me away and put me in a home with strangers, and I'll never see him again. The words poured out of her in a torrent. All the fear and desperation she'd been holding back finally breaking free. And Patrick realized that this little girl had been carrying the weight of her family's survival on her 7-year-old shoulders. Probably for months. Listen to me, Patrick said, his voice low and intense. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix this. That's a promise, a real one, and I don't break my promises. Kelly searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the disappointment that was surely coming. Patrick held her gaze, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she nodded, a tiny movement that felt like a leap of faith. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Mr. Harris. The nurse cleared her throat. The social worker will be here in about an hour. Until then, Kelly needs to rest. Patrick stood up, his knees protesting. Can I see her father? Room 237. But he's sleeping. The doctors sedated him so his body could recover. Patrick nodded and turned to leave, but Kelly's voice stopped him. Mr. Harris? He looked back. Thank you for not leaving, she said, echoing her words from earlier. Even when you probably should have. Patrick didn't have a response to that. He just nodded and walked out, his mind already racing through possibilities. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone and called Tank again. Talk to me, Tank answered. I need the club's lawyer. Now. Boss, what's going on? Social services is getting involved. They're going to try to take the kid away from her father. And we're getting involved in this why? It was a fair question. Patrick leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Because somebody has to. And it might as well be us. Tank was quiet for a moment. You know this is going to get complicated, right? We start pulling strings. People are going to ask questions. About us. About the club. I know. And you're doing it anyway? Patrick thought about Kelly's bleeding feet. About Vincent's desperate budget. About a little girl who'd run 2 miles in 100-degree heat because she refused to let her father die alone. Yeah, he said. I'm doing it anyway. All right, brother. I'll make the calls. But Patrick? Tank's voice was serious. Whatever you're starting here, make sure you're ready to see it through. Because that kid is going to be counting on you now. Patrick ended the call and made his way to room 237. Through the window, he could see Vincent sleeping, hooked up to various monitors and IVs. He looked better than he had in the trailer, color returning to his face, breathing steady and strong. A doctor was reviewing charts outside the room. Patrick approached him. Vincent Crawford. How is he? The doctor looked up, taking in Patrick's appearance with the same wariness the ER nurse had shown. Are you family? No, but I'm the one who found him. Gave him glucose gel until the paramedics arrived. The doctor's expression shifted to something more respectful. Then you probably saved his life. He was in severe hypoglycemic shock. Another hour and we'd be having a very different conversation. Will he be okay? Physically, yes. We're getting his blood sugar stabilized and making sure there's no organ damage. But the doctor hesitated. His diabetes is poorly managed. He's been rationing insulin, skipping doses, trying to make it last longer. It's a miracle he hasn't had more episodes like this. He can't afford his medication, Patrick said flatly. The doctor's jaw tightened. I see it more often than you'd think. People choosing between medicine and food, between treatment and rent. The system is broken, and patients like Mr. Crawford fall through the cracks. What does he need? To manage his condition properly? The doctor pulled out a prescription pad and started writing. Insulin, test strips, a new glucose monitor, regular doctor visits, a proper diet. I'm writing prescriptions for everything, but... He handed the paper to Patrick. This is going to run about $500 a month, even with the patient assistance programs I'm enrolling him in. And that's just the medical supplies. He needs stable housing, reliable electricity for refrigerating the insulin, and enough food to maintain stable blood sugar. Patrick looked at the list, his mind calculating. $500 a month for medical supplies, $400 for rent, food, utilities, clothing for a growing kid. They were looking at least $1,500 a month, probably more. And Vincent was pulling in less than $1,000 on disability and odd job. The math didn't work. It would never work. Unless someone changed the equation. When can he go home? Patrick asked. We'll keep him overnight for observation. If everything looks good, he can be discharged tomorrow afternoon. But Mr. Harris, the doctor's expression was grave. He can't go back to living the way he was. The next time this happens, he might not be so lucky. And that little girl shouldn't be living in those conditions. She won't be, Patrick said, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. I'm going to make sure of it. The doctor studied him for a long moment. You know, most people would have just called 911 and walked away. Why are you getting involved? Patrick looked through the window at Vincent's sleeping form, then thought about Kelly down the hall with her bandaged feet and her desperate hope that someone, anyone, would actually help. "Because somebody has to," he said. "And I'm here." He left the hospital as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. His phone buzzed with a text from Tank. "Lawyer is on standby. Also talk to Reaper, Chains, and some of the others. They want to help. What do you need?" Patrick sat on his bike in the parking lot, watching the hospital lights flicker on as darkness fell. He thought about his own childhood, about foster homes and social workers, and the constant fear of being moved again, of never belonging anywhere. He thought about the walls he'd built to protect himself from ever feeling that vulnerable again. And he thought about a 7-year-old girl who'd grabbed his vest with bloody hands and begged him not to leave her. He typed back, "Everything. I need everything." Then he started his bike and rode into the gathering darkness, already planning how to keep a promise he had no business making. Patrick didn't go home that night. Instead, he rode to the Iron Riders clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town that served as their headquarters, meeting place, and sanctuary from a world that had never quite made room for men like them. The clubhouse was more than just a building. It was a statement. The exterior was deliberately intimidating. Steel doors, security cameras, and the club's logo painted 20 feet high on the brick wall. But inside, it was something else entirely. A bar that Tank had built himself, pool tables and dartboards, leather couches worn soft by years of use, photographs covering the walls, club runs, charity events, brothers who'd passed on but were never forgotten. This was home. The only real home Patrick had known since he was 18 years old. Several bikes were already parked outside when he arrived. Word had spread, apparently. Tank must have made more calls than Patrick had authorized. But he found he didn't mind. The Iron Riders operated on a principle of collective decision-making for anything that affected the club as a whole. If Patrick was about to do something that would draw attention to them, the brothers deserved a say. He pushed through the doors to find a dozen men waiting. Tank and Reaper, of course. Chains, whose real name was Michael, but who'd earned his road name after using a bike chain to defend a brother in a bar fight 15 years ago. Preacher, the club's oldest member at 62, who'd actually been a minister before his wife died, and he'd traded his collar for leather. Diesel, their mechanic. Hawk, their treasurer, and several others, all watching Patrick with expressions that ranged from curious to concerned. "All right," Tank said, sliding a beer across the bar to Patrick. "Talk to us. What's going on?" Patrick took a long pull from the bottle, organizing his thoughts. These men were his brothers, but they were also practical. They'd want to know why he was asking them to get involved in something that could bring unwanted attention to the club. "You all know what happened today," he started. "Little girl, dying father, poverty situation. What you don't know is how bad it really is." He laid it out for them. The empty trailer, the budget that didn't add up, Vincent's impossible choice between medicine and food, Kelly's bleeding feet and malnourished frame, the social worker who would be making an assessment tomorrow that could tear what was left of that family apart. "The system is going to fail them," Patrick said. "It already has failed them. Vincent's on disability, but it's not enough. He can't work because his diabetes isn't controlled, and his diabetes isn't controlled because he can't afford the supplies to manage it. It's a cycle with no exit." "So what are you proposing?" Hawk asked. As treasurer, he was always the practical one, the one who asked about costs and consequences. I'm proposing we break the cycle, Patrick said. We pay off the medical bills. Get them into stable housing. Make sure Vincent has his medication and Kelly has food and clothes and whatever else she needs. We give them a chance to get back on their feet. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Diesel spoke up. How much are we talking? Medical bills are probably $20,000-$30,000. First and last month's rent on a decent place, maybe $3,000. Medication and supplies for 6 months while Vincent gets stable, another $3,000. Call it $40,000 to start, plus ongoing support. Hawk whistled low. That's a significant chunk of the charity fund. I know. And what's our connection to these people? Chains asked. I mean, I feel for them. But we get asked for help all the time. We can't save everyone. It was a fair question. The Iron Riders did a lot of charity work. Toy drives for kids at Christmas, fundraisers for veterans, support for families of fallen first responders. But they had to be selective. Their resources weren't unlimited. Our connection is that I gave my word, Patrick said. I promised that little girl I'd fix this. And I don't break my promises. Since when? Reaper asked, not unkindly. Boss, you've been preaching the don't get involved gospel for as long as I've known you. What's different about this situation? Patrick set down his beer, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. When I was 8 years old, he said slowly, my father burned down our house while drunk. My mother died in the fire. I ended up in foster care, and I spent the next 10 years being shuffled from home to home, never belonging anywhere, never having anyone who gave a damn whether I lived or died. The room was silent. Most of the brothers knew pieces of Patrick's history, but he'd never laid it out like this before. I survived by building walls, Patrick continued, by deciding that I didn't need anyone, that caring about people just gave them power to hurt you. And for 20 years, that worked. It kept me safe, kept me strong. He paused, remembering Kelly's desperate eyes, her small hands clutching his vest. But today, a 7-year-old girl grabbed onto me like I was her last hope in the world. And I saw myself in her. That scared kid who lost everything. Except she has something I didn't. She has a father who loves her, who's literally choosing between his own health and her survival. And she has the courage to ask for help instead of building walls. Patrick looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. I can't save the kid I was, but I can save Kelly. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm doing this more for me than for her. But I'm asking you brothers to help me do it anyway. The silence stretched out. Then Preacher stood up, his weathered face creasing into a smile. I'm in, he said simply. Put me down for $5,000. $3,000 from me, Diesel added. Same, said Chains. One by one, the brothers pledged money, time, resources. By the time they were done, they'd committed over $60,000 in countless hours of labor. Tank was the last to speak. You know this is going to change things, right? We start doing this kind of direct intervention, word's going to spread. We'll have people coming to us with sob stories every week. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing, Patrick said. Tank studied him for a long moment, then broke into a grin. Damn, boss. Never thought I'd see the day you went soft. I'm not soft, Patrick protested, but there was no heat in it. You're adopting a family. Reaper pointed out. That's pretty soft. I'm not adopting anyone. I'm just helping out. The brothers laughed, and Patrick felt something warm spread through his chest. This was why the club mattered. Not the bikes or the leather or the reputation. This, the knowledge that when you needed your brothers, they showed up. No questions asked. All right, Hawk said, pulling out his laptop. Let's get organized. We need a plan. They spent the next 3 hours hammering out details. Hawk would work with the club's lawyer to negotiate the medical bills down and set up a payment plan. Diesel knew a landlord who owned some decent rental properties and might be willing to work with them on a lease for Vincent. Chains had a connection at a medical supply company who could get them insulin and test strips at cost. Preacher volunteered to coordinate the furniture and household supplies they'd need. What about the social worker? Tank asked. That's the immediate problem. If they decide Kelly's in danger, they can remove her from Vincent's custody tomorrow. Patrick had been thinking about that. We need to show them that the situation is being addressed. That Vincent has support and resources now. The lawyer can help with that, Hawk said. But it would be better if we had something concrete to show them. Like a new place for them to live. Can we make that happen by tomorrow afternoon? Patrick asked. Diesel pulled out his phone. Let me make a call. While Diesel stepped outside, the others continued planning. They'd need to clean out the trailer, salvage anything worth keeping, get Kelly enrolled in school. Patrick hadn't even thought about that. But of course, she should be in school. Set up a support system so Vincent wasn't trying to manage everything alone. This is going to require ongoing involvement, Preacher pointed out. We can't just throw money at the problem and walk away. Vincent's going to need help managing his condition, getting to doctor's appointments, all of that. And Kelly's going to need, well, everything. Stability, structure, people she can count on. I'll handle it, Patrick said. Tank raised an eyebrow. You? Boss, no offense, but you don't know anything about kids. I'll learn. And you're going to have time for this. Running the club, managing our business interests, and now playing dad to a 7-year-old. I'll make time. Tank shook his head, but he was smiling. Man, you've got it bad. That kid really got to you, didn't she? Patrick didn't answer, but he didn't need to. They all knew the truth. Diesel came back inside, grinning. Got us a place. 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. Landlord's a friend. His kid got into some trouble a few years back, and we helped sort it out. He's willing to waive the credit check and first month's rent. We can move them in tomorrow. Just like that? Patrick asked, surprised. Just like that. Told you, boss. You're not the only one who remembers what it's like to need help. By midnight, they had a comprehensive plan. By 2 a.m, they'd made most of the necessary calls and arrangements. By 3, Patrick finally headed home, exhausted but feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Patrick was back at the hospital by 9 the next morning, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. He found Kelly in the pediatric ward, eating breakfast with an enthusiasm that suggested she was making up for days of missed meals. Mr. Harris. She waved at him with a fork full of scrambled eggs. Look, they have pancakes and bacon and orange juice. Patrick couldn't help but smile at her excitement over what was, objectively, mediocre hospital food. Glad you're enjoying it, kid, How are your feet?" "They hurt," Kelly admitted. "But the nurse said they're healing good. She said I was very brave." "You were. You are." Patrick pulled up a chair beside her bed. "Listen, Kelly, I need to talk to you about something. A social worker is going to come talk to you and your dad today." Kelly's face fell, her fork clattering to the plate. "They're going to take me away." "No," Patrick said firmly. "They're not. But they are going to ask you questions about how you've been living, and I need you to tell them the truth, okay? Don't try to hide anything or protect your dad. Just tell them what's been happening. But if I tell them we didn't have food or electricity, they'll say Daddy can't take care of me. Your dad has been doing the best he can, with impossible circumstances," Patrick said. "But things are going to be different now. You're going to have a new place to live. Your dad's going to have his medicine. You're going to have food and clothes and everything you need." Kelly looked at him with those two old eyes. "How? How are you going to do all that?" "I've got friends who want to help. Good people who believe that families should stay together." "Why?" Kelly asked. "Why do they want to help us? They don't even know us." It was a question Patrick had been asking himself all night. "Because that's what good people do," he said finally. "They help when they can. And right now, we can help." Kelly was quiet for a moment, pushing her eggs around her plate. "My mom used to say that angels come in all kinds of disguises. She said sometimes they look like regular people and you don't even know they're angels until they do something amazing. Your mom sounds like she was a smart lady." "She was the best," Kelly said, her voice thick with emotion. "She got sick real fast. One day she was fine, and then she wasn't. And then she was gone. Daddy tried so hard to save her. He spent all our money on doctors and medicine, but it didn't matter. She died anyway." Patrick felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry, kid. That's not fair." "Nothing's fair," Kelly said with the weary wisdom of someone far older than 7. "But Daddy says we have to keep going anyway. He says Mom would want us to be happy. Your dad's right." "Are you an angel, Mr. Harris?" Kelly asked suddenly, looking up at him with those penetrating eyes. Patrick almost laughed. "No, kid. Definitely not an angel. Just a guy on a motorcycle who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "That's what angels do," Kelly said matter-of-factly. "They show up right when you need them." Before Patrick could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Kelly, your father's awake and asking for you. And the social worker is here." Kelly's hand shot out and grabbed Patrick's. "Will you come with me?" "Please." Patrick squeezed her hand. "I'll be right there." "I promise." Vincent looked better than he had the day before, though still weak. He was sitting up in bed, color back in his face, but his eyes were haunted with worry. When Kelly ran into the room and threw her arms around him, he held her like he'd never let go. "Baby girl," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I scared you." "It's okay, Daddy." Mr. Harris helped. He made everything okay. Vincent looked up at Patrick, who stood in the doorway. "Mr. Harris, I don't know how to thank you." "You can start by calling me Patrick," he said, stepping into the room. "And you can thank me by taking better care of yourself so Kelly doesn't have to go through that again." I will. I swear I will. Vincent's voice was thick with emotion. The doctor told me what you did. How you gave me the glucose gel, stayed with Kelly, followed us here. You didn't have to do any of that. Yeah, I did, Patrick said simply. A woman in a business suit appeared behind Patrick. Mr. Crawford, I'm Jennifer Martinez from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you and Kelly about your living situation. Patrick saw Vincent's face go pale, saw Kelly's grip on her father tighten. He stepped forward. Ms. Martinez, I'm Patrick Harris. I'm the one who found Vincent and Kelly yesterday. Before you start your assessment, there are some things you should know. Jennifer Martinez turned her professional gaze on him. And you are family? A friend? A friend, Patrick said. And someone who's been working to address the issues that led to yesterday's emergency. Mr. Harris, I appreciate your concern, but this is a matter for Child Protective Services to handle. I understand that, but I think you'll want to hear what I have to say before you make any decisions about Kelly's placement. Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. All right. Let's talk in the hallway. Patrick followed her out, leaving Vincent and Kelly clinging to each other in the hospital bed. Mr. Harris, Jennifer began, her tone professional but not unkind. I've reviewed the preliminary reports. A 7-year-old child was living without electricity or adequate food. Her father nearly died from a preventable medical emergency. These are serious red flags. I know, Patrick said. And I'm not trying to minimize the situation. But Vincent Crawford isn't a neglectful father. He's a man who's been trying to survive an impossible situation. Many parents face difficult circumstances. That doesn't mean he was spending $300 a month on insulin, Patrick interrupted. That left him with less than $2 a day for food for both of them. He was rationing his medication to make it last longer, which is what caused yesterday's crisis. He wasn't being careless. He was making impossible choices because the system failed him. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. I understand that, Mr. Harris. But my job is to ensure Kelly's safety. And right now, I can't be confident that returning her to her father's care is safe. What if the circumstances changed? Patrick asked. What if Vincent had stable housing, reliable income, and access to his medication? Then we'd be having a different conversation. But that's not the current reality. It will be by this afternoon, Patrick said. I've arranged for Vincent and Kelly to move into a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. Rent is covered for the next 6 months. Vincent's medical bills are being paid, and we've secured a steady supply of insulin and test strips. He's also being enrolled in a comprehensive diabetes management program. Jennifer stared at him. You arranged all of this? In less than 24 hours. I have resources. And I have friends who want to help. Mr. Harris, that's very generous. But I need to understand your relationship to this family. Are you related? A family friend. Because this level of involvement from a stranger is unusual. Patrick chose his words carefully. Yesterday, a terrified little girl grabbed onto me and begged me to save her father. I did. And then I realized that saving him once wasn't enough. I needed to change the circumstances that put them in danger in the first place. So that's what I'm doing. Why? Jennifer asked, echoing Kelly's question from earlier. What's in this for you? Nothing, Patrick said honestly, except the knowledge that I kept a family together when the system was about to tear them apart. Jennifer studied him for a long moment. I'm going to need to verify everything you've told me. The housing, the financial support, all of it. And I'll need to do a home visit once they're settled. Of course. And Mr. Harris, if this is some kind of scam, if you're taking advantage of a vulnerable family, I will find out. And there will be consequences. Patrick met her gaze steadily. It's not a scam. I'm just trying to help. Jennifer nodded slowly. All right. Let me talk to Vincent and Kelly. Then we'll go from there. Patrick waited in the hallway while Jennifer conducted her interviews. Through the door, he could hear Kelly's voice, high and anxious, answering questions. He heard Vincent's deeper tones, apologetic and desperate. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Jennifer emerged. I'm not removing Kelly from her father's custody, she said. But this case will remain open. I'll be conducting regular home visits for the next 6 months to ensure the situation remains stable. And Vincent will need to comply with his medical treatment plan and attend parenting classes. He will, Patrick said. I'll make sure of it. Mr. Harris, I have to ask. Are you prepared for the level of commitment you're taking on? Supporting a family isn't a one-time thing. It's ongoing. It's complicated. It's going to require time and energy and emotional investment. Patrick thought about the walls he'd built, the rules he'd lived by, the careful distance he'd maintained from anything that might hurt him. Then he thought about Kelly's smile when she'd seen the hospital breakfast, about Vincent's desperate love for his daughter, about the chance to save someone the way no one had saved him. Yeah, he said, I'm prepared. Jennifer handed him her card. Call me when they're settled in the new place. I'll come by for the home visit. She left, and Patrick went back into the room. Vincent and Kelly were holding each other, both crying. But these were different tears. Relief, hope, joy. She said, I can stay with Daddy, Kelly said, her face pressed against her father's chest. She said we can stay together. I told you, Patrick said. I promised I'd fix it. Vincent looked at him, tears streaming down his face. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you? Patrick pulled up a chair, suddenly exhausted. You're not nothing. You're a father who loves his daughter and a kid who's braver than most adults I know. That's not nothing. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't have to repay me. Just get better. Take care of Kelly. Build a life. That's all the payment I need. Vincent shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't understand. People don't just do things like this. Not for strangers. Maybe they should, Patrick said. Maybe the world would be a better place if more people did. Kelly wiggled out of her father's arms and climbed off the bed, limping over to Patrick on her bandaged feet. She threw her arms around his neck, and Patrick found himself hugging her back. This tiny person who'd somehow cracked through 20 years of carefully constructed armor in less than 24 hours. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being our angel. Patrick didn't correct her this time. He just held her and let himself feel something he'd thought was dead, the simple, profound satisfaction of knowing he'd made a difference. Outside the hospital window, the sun was climbing higher in a cloudless sky. It was going to be another hot day, but somehow it felt a little less oppressive than before. The apartment Diesel had secured was in a neighborhood called Riverside. Not the fanciest part of town, but safe, clean, and a universe away from the falling apart trailer. The building was a modest 3-story complex with a small playground out front and flower boxes in the windows. It looked like the kind of place where families lived, where kids rode bikes in the parking lot and neighbors knew each other's names. Patrick stood in the empty apartment, taking inventory. 2 bedrooms, a full bathroom, a kitchen with actual appliances that worked, and a living room with carpet that was worn but clean. The walls were painted a neutral beige. The windows had blinds. There was a thermostat on the wall, climate control, something Vincent and Kelly hadn't had in months. It was basic, simple, and to a family who'd been living without electricity or running water, it would feel like a palace. Not bad, right? Diesel said, appearing in the doorway with his arms full of cleaning supplies. Landlord said the last tenants moved out 2 weeks ago. Place is clean, but we should probably give it another once-over before Vincent and Kelly get here. Behind Diesel came a parade of iron riders, each carrying something. Chains had boxes of kitchen supplies. Reaper carried a vacuum cleaner. Tank struggled through the door with a disassembled bed frame. Preacher directed traffic like a general commanding troops. Beds go in the bedrooms, obviously. Preacher called out, "Kitchen stuff in the kitchen." Hawk's bringing the couch and chairs in about an hour. Diesel, you and Chain start on the cleaning. Patrick, you're with me. We need to make a grocery run. Patrick found himself taking orders from Preacher, which would have been amusing under other circumstances. But right now, he was just grateful for the organization. Left to his own devices, he would have had no idea where to start. "Come on, boss," Preacher said, jangling his keys. "Let's go fill up that kitchen." They took Preacher's truck to a big box store, and Patrick found himself pushing a cart through aisles he'd never paid attention to before. Cereal, bread, milk, eggs, pasta, sauce, canned goods, fresh fruit, vegetables, meat for the freezer. "How much food does a 7-year-old eat?" Patrick asked, staring at the overwhelming array of options. "More than you'd think," Preacher said, tossing boxes of macaroni and cheese into the cart. "Kids are always hungry, and Kelly's been underfed for months. She's going to need good, nutritious food to get her strength back." They filled 2 carts with groceries, then hit the household goods section. Towels, sheets, pillows, dishes, silverware, pots and pans, cleaning supplies, trash cans, a shower curtain, toilet paper. Patrick grabbed 3 of the mega packs, remembering the stack of fast food napkins in the trailer's bathroom. "Don't forget the kids' stuff," Preacher said, steering them toward another section. "She's going to need toys, books, things to do." Patrick stood in the toy aisle, completely lost. He knew nothing about what 7-year-old girls liked. Dolls, puzzles, art supplies. Everything looked either too young or too old, too girly or not girly enough. "Just get a variety," Preacher advised. "Some books, some art stuff, maybe a doll or 2. She'll let you know what she likes." They added coloring books, crayons, a few chapter books that the store employee recommended, a stuffed animal that looked soft and huggable, and a simple doll. Patrick felt ridiculous, but Preacher seemed to know what he was doing. "You've done this before," Patrick observed. "Had 3 daughters," Preacher said. "They're all grown now, but I remember the basics. Kids need structure, routine, and to know they're safe. Everything else, you figure out as you go." I don't know anything about being a parent. Nobody does, until they are one. You just do your best and hope it's enough. Preacher paused, then added, You know you're basically becoming this kid's father figure, right? Whether you planned it or not. Patrick had been trying not to think about that. I'm just helping out, making sure they have what they need. Boss, you're moving them into an apartment, filling their kitchen, buying toys for a little girl you met yesterday. That's not just helping out. That's commitment. That's family. I don't do family, Patrick said automatically. You didn't do family, Preacher corrected. Past tense, because right now, you're doing exactly that. They loaded up the truck and headed back to the apartment, where controlled chaos had transformed the empty space into something that looked almost like a home. The beds were assembled. A double in the larger bedroom for Vincent, a twin in the smaller room for Kelly. A couch and 2 chairs sat in the living room, arranged around a coffee table. The kitchen had been scrubbed clean, and someone had even put a vase of flowers on the counter. Tank's wife sent those, Diesel explained, nodding at the flowers. She also sent curtains for Kelly's room. Said every little girl needs pretty curtains. Patrick felt something warm spread through his chest. The brothers' wives and girlfriends had gotten involved too, contributing things he never would have thought of. Curtains, decorative pillows, a welcome mat for the front door, a set of dishes with flowers on them. They spent the next 2 hours putting everything away. Groceries in the kitchen, organized by type. Towels and linens in the bathroom closet. Clothes, new clothes that Chane's wife had bought in Kelly's size, hung in the closet and folded in the dresser. The toys and books arranged on a small bookshelf in Kelly's room. By the time they were done, the apartment looked lived in, warm, safe, like a place where a family could heal and start over. Not bad for a day's work, Tank said, surveying their efforts. Think they'll like it? They're going to lose their minds, Patrick said, imagining Kelly's face when she saw her own bedroom, her own bed, a closet full of new clothes. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Vincent is being discharged. We'll be ready in about an hour. They're coming, Patrick announced. Everyone out. I want to bring them here without an audience. The brothers filed out, but not before each one clapped Patrick on the shoulder or pulled him into a brief hug. This was what the club was about. Not the bikes or the leather or the reputation, but this. Brotherhood. Showing up for each other, making things right when the world went wrong. When they were gone, Patrick stood alone in the apartment, suddenly nervous. What if Vincent was offended by the charity? What if Kelly didn't like the toys he'd picked? What if he'd overstepped, made assumptions, pushed too hard? But then he remembered the empty trailer, the medical bills, Kelly's bleeding feet. And he knew that whatever mistakes he might have made, they were better than the alternative. Patrick picked up Vincent and Kelly from the hospital in Tank's truck. His motorcycle wasn't exactly family-friendly transportation. Vincent moved slowly, still weak from his ordeal, but his color was good and his eyes were clear. Kelly bounced with barely contained energy, her feet still bandaged, but not slowing her down. Where are we going? Kelly asked as Patrick helped her into the truck. Back to the trailer? Nope, Patrick said. Somewhere better. Better how? Vincent asked, his voice cautious. He'd been quiet since they left the hospital, and Patrick could see the worry in his eyes. The man was probably terrified of what came next, of how he'd managed to keep his daughters safe when he'd barely been managing before. "You'll see," Patrick said, pulling out of the hospital parking lot. 3 months passed in a blur of healing and new beginnings. Vincent's health stabilized with proper medication and regular meals. The Iron Riders had officially hired him to manage their finances, real work that paid real money and restored his dignity. Kelly thrived in school, making friends and excelling in her classes. And Patrick discovered what it meant to be part of a family. He showed up every evening for dinner. He read bedtime stories. He attended parent-teacher conferences and school concerts. When Kelly performed a solo in the winter concert, wearing a red velvet dress, Patrick cried alongside Vincent, overwhelmed by pride for this little girl who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Maya's mom asked if you were my dad," Kelly said one night after the concert. "I told her you were my Patrick dad. Is that okay?" Vincent smiled through his tears. "That's more than okay, baby girl. You have 2 dads who love you very much." Vincent sat Patrick down with a serious request. "I want to make it official. Legal guardianship papers. If anything happens to me, Kelly goes to you. Not into the system, to you." Patrick felt the weight of it. The responsibility, the trust, the love. "What if I mess it up?" "You won't," Vincent said with absolute certainty. "You already prove that every single day." The paperwork was finalized before Christmas. Patrick Harris was now Kelly's legal guardian, her father in the eyes of the law. The Iron Riders threw a celebration, and Patrick gave a speech that left everyone in tears. 4 months ago, this kid grabbed my vest and asked me to save her father. She tore down every wall I'd built around my heart. She taught me that family isn't blood, it's choice, and I choose her. Every single day. But challenges remained. A rival motorcycle club called the Scorpions began pushing into Iron Riders' territory, vandalizing businesses and making threats. The old Patrick would have responded with violence. But the new Patrick, the father, the protector, chose a different path. He reached out to every major club in the region, building a coalition that isolated the Scorpions diplomatically rather than through bloodshed. It worked. The threat was neutralized without a single punch thrown, without bringing danger to the families the Iron Riders now protected. "You've changed," Tank told him. "You think about consequences now, about families and futures." "I have a daughter," Patrick said simply. "That changes everything." In January, Vincent made an announcement that both thrilled and terrified Patrick. "I found us a house. A real home for all 3 of us. Not you helping us. A genuine family living together because that's where we all want to be." Patrick felt tears stream down his face. "I've wanted that since the day you moved out." "Then let's do it," Vincent said. "Let's build the family none of us ever had." They found a 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard. The Iron Riders helped renovate it, and by March, they were moving in. Kelly picked lavender paint for her room. Vincent set up his office, and Patrick finally had a place that felt like home. The house became more than just a residence. It became a symbol. The Iron Riders outreach program expanded, helping dozens of families avoid eviction, find jobs, and get back on their feet. Patrick had started something that rippled through the entire community. One act of kindness had sparked a movement. "You're breaking the cycle," Preacher told him at a community barbecue 6 months later. "Kelly's going to grow up knowing that people help each other, and she'll help someone else someday, and it'll just keep spreading. Patrick watched Kelly play with other children, her laughter carrying across the yard. Vincent was manning the grill, looking healthy and happy and whole. This was what winning looked like. Not territory or reputation, but love and belonging and purpose. That night, as Patrick tucked Kelly into bed, she asked him a question. "Do you remember the day we met? When I found you at the gas station, I remember. I was so scared. But something told me you could help. Do you think Mommy sent you? From heaven?" Patrick thought about Sarah Crawford, the woman he'd never met but who'd shaped everything. "Yeah, kid. I think maybe she did." Kelly smiled. "I think she knew you needed us just as much as we needed you." She was right. Patrick had been empty, going through the motions of life without really living. And a barefoot girl with bloody feet had shown him what it meant to be human again. 5 years later, Kelly stood at a middle school podium, giving a speech about community service. At 12 years old, she told their story, the trailer, her father's illness, the desperate search for help. She talked about Patrick, the stranger who'd chosen to care. "Patrick taught me that family isn't about who you're related to," Kelly said, her voice strong and clear. "It's about who shows up. Who cares? Who chooses to love you even when it's hard?" She finished to thunderous applause, then ran straight to Patrick and Vincent, hugging them both tightly. That night, over spaghetti and ice cream sundaes, Kelly looked at her two fathers and smiled. "We're pretty lucky, aren't we?" Patrick looked at Vincent, who was crying happy tears. He looked at Kelly, who'd grown from a scared 7-year-old into a confident, compassionate young woman. He looked at the home they'd built together, filled with love and laughter and purpose. "Yeah, kid," Patrick said, his heart full to bursting. "We're the luckiest family in the world." Because a barefoot girl had changed everything. She taught Patrick that asking for help was an act of courage, and giving it was an act of grace. That family was built through choice and showing up, even when it was hard. That one moment of kindness could ripple out to change hundreds of lives. Patrick had spent 40 years believing he was unlovable, destined to be alone. But Kelly had proven him wrong. She'd grabbed his vest with bloody hands and asked him to save her father. And in saving them, Patrick had saved himself. They were a family now. Not perfect, not conventional, but real and true, and filled with the kind of love that changed lives. And Patrick would spend the rest of his life grateful that a brave little girl had been courageous enough to ask a stranger for help, because that one moment had led to everything. To this family, this love, this life. A barefoot girl had changed the world, and Patrick Harris would never forget it.
Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end. If this story touched you, then trust me, you don't want to miss the next one. Tap the video showing on your screen right now and enjoy what comes next.